Question 6 says, suggest suitable progressions for the two phrases in the following melody, indicating only one chord, 1, 2, 4 or 5, at each of the places marked A to E. You don't need to indicate any inversion of the chord. So this is asking us a question about harmony, and it's asking us to look at this melody and suggest an appropriate harmony for that part of the melody. And this should be relatively straightforward. We can do things like look at the notes in the melody and see what kind of chords those might be outlining to us. We can also look at things like, is this a cadence? Is this coming to the end of the phrase? Because there's certain cadences, like harmonic patterns that make up cadences that are likely to give the game away. Perhaps. One clue, one thing that's quite interesting, I was talked before a little bit about uppercase and lowercase Roman numerals, and here I'm interested to see that they've used uppercase for 2, because in a major key we're normally expecting chord 2, the supertonic chord, to be a minor chord. Now if they've used uppercase Roman numerals, that's indicating that it's normally going to be a major chord, and so we're looking at chord 2 probably being used as what we call a secondary dominant. So in this key, what might be quite good actually to start us off is just to work out, well, what are these chords going to be? That's going to really help us, I think. So chord 1 is D major. Dead easy. It's a tonic chord. I wouldn't be surprised if we're wanting to use this at some point in this phrase, because chord 1 comes up a lot. Chord 2, not so commonly found in the key of D major. This is major chord 2, so this is E major. And this is an example of probably something being used as a major dominant, a secondary dominant. And secondary dominants help sort of strengthen progressions, help us strengthen normally the move to the dominant. And in this case it would be. So it helps a move to chord 5. So I'll write chord 5 in now. Chord 5 is going to be A major. And we might find E major being used to kind of strengthen a harmonic progression towards chord 5, A major. So we will see what we might find. And the other possibility is chord 4. And chord 4 in this case is G major. So let's have a look at our example. Well, there we go. Let's look at letter A, because letter A is exactly an example of this use of the secondary dominant, which is just strengthening a move to, in this case, chord 5. This is clearly a bit of melody that needs chord 5 underneath it. If you look at the notes, all the notes come from chord 5, the dominant chord of A major. So in fact, I might answer question B, or chord B, before I do chord A, but this has to be, there's no other chord really that's going to fit here apart from chord 5. And the appearance of this G sharp again really means that we've only got a couple of options, and the fact that we've been restricted only to 4 chords anyway suggests to me that we have to use chord 2, and this is chord sort of major chord 2. So we'd normally expect E minor. That's the kind of default chord 2 in D major, but here, because of the G natural, so the G sharp in the melody, we've really sort of been given quite a strong steer that we're going to need chord 2 there. Chord C, so what would we use to fit in these? Now this is quite interesting. So we've got a bit of a melody here. I think what we're gonna consider to be the harmony notes are these ones. I think this is just a kind of passing note between the B and the G. If we look for a chord that can nicely harmonise G and B, we've probably again only got one option, and that's going to be chord 4, a chord of G major. It's going to nicely harmonise that. Not many options here either. We've got A, E, C sharp and E. Basically has to be chord 5 again. And unless there's something very strange going on, or we have something called an interrupted cadence, this is almost certainly going to be chord 1 that harmonises this return to the tonic note of D. I think I would stick a chord of D major under this. This was quite an interesting question. It required us to know a little bit about secondary dominants and how those can appear often in music, or often alongside accidentals in melody lines, how we sometimes just swap in some different chords to make our harmonic progressions more interesting. I think if we didn't know about secondary dominants, we might have got confused by chord A, but apart from that, B, C, D and E, really, they're so clear, the harmonies that need to go under those. There really aren't any other options, particularly when we've got such a restricted set of choices anyway. But even without that, it'd be very difficult to look at, say, the phrase in B and say that could be anything other than A major, so dominant harmony. Maybe, you know, in your exam you'll get a more difficult example that maybe has some more ambiguity about it, so it could be one chord or another. I think if you make a sensible choice, something that would fit, no one would have a problem with that at all, and you will get the marks. So that is the end of question 6. Let's move on and have a look at question 7.